Hi there, folks. Saber4 here. I am coming to you today with a really long one. This is going to be Admiral Piett. This is a 3-deck deep dive. We're going to discuss the blue, red, and yellow versions of Admiral Piett, plus talk about matchups. I've got a drink here beside me because a little fun fact about the Saber4 videos, these are shot in one take. So everything that you see from here on does not cut away. What's going to be in this video? We're going to talk about Admiral Piett. We're going to talk about the playstyle of Admiral Piett. We're going to talk about the key cards that come through command. Why are we talking about each of those individually? Well, because I'm going to go through 3 decks. And with each of those 3 decks, you're going to see the key cards that come out of Vigilance, then out of Aggression, then out of Cunning. Once we're done with that, we'll talk a little bit about the meta matchups that I see with this first week going forward. And that means that we'll discuss a little bit about how Piett plays into Django, how he plays into Han, how he plays into Quinlan Voss, how he plays into the mirror match, and how he plays into Sabine. We'll talk a little bit at the end about which one to play and just kind of some final thoughts. Before we get going, if you would, take a look down at the subscribe button, hit that thing for me. It'll really help us out grow the channel. Appreciate you being here. Let's dive in. So, Admiral Piett, why are we looking at this leader? What is his playstyle? Admiral Piett is an incredibly linear deck. And what I mean by an incredibly linear deck is that I really always want to do the same thing no matter which flavor of this thing I'm playing. I have a strong preference to ramp on turn 2. I'm setting up a flip on turn 3. I would like to ramp on turn 3. I want to be able to play that resupply carrier as well. My leader unit has a static discount on capital ships, and so when I'm on my leader side, I have a action to deploy a capital ship from my hand with a 1 resource discount. When he is on the board as a unit, he can do that to any capital ship that you play. He's a 2 resource discount the entire way through. So from the Piett flip onward, our early end game ships have very explosive damage. The smallest ship that you're going to see as far as capital ships go is a 4 damage resupply carrier, and it's a 4/6 body. So it's a big ship out there in space. It makes you really a lot less vulnerable to things like indirect damage. It's also going to get out ahead of other decks. So we're going to talk about kind of how these things play in together. But just realize that when we're playing Piett and when you're sitting across from Piett, if you're looking at this trying to figure out how you're going against him, it's a very linear deck. It wants to do the same things, and it wants them to be consistent. Variability in the decks comes by their paired color. Blue is a more controlling play. They might not be as aggressive to ramp. Their biggest threat on the board is going to be the Avenger. They might work their way to the Annihilator. I have not in the deck that I'm running, but they might want to work their way there. In red, the Devastator and Planetary Bombardment is a unparalleled combo for indirect damage, because now I get to assign where that goes, and I'm getting 12 of it out of a card. So if I can get that on the board, I've done the 4 from Devastator coming down. I do the 12 where I choose, and that is just a super aggressive way to play. And then yellow is the third option that we're going to show here, and that comes with bounce effects, exhaust effects, triple dark raid, bringing us ships from the deck rather than the hand. It might be the more diverse version of this just because it allows me to tutor in those cards instead of relying on draw. Now, if that word seems unfamiliar, or if you're not familiar with other things, tutoring a card in means that I'm able to draw it from my deck. I'm able to use a specific card and go get another one. And yellow allows you to do that with triple dark raid. So, our key command cards. Some of the things that we're going to build around in almost every deck that we see. First off is the ramp package. The ramp package is pretty robust here for Piett. You have resupply and super laser tech on the 3 resource turn. You have the resupply carrier, and if you have played one of those 2 on the first turn, or on the second turn, resupply carrier can come in with Piett's ability on the third. And that's going to put you way ahead on resources if that happens. Sometimes you'll be able to chain that in a way where you've done your Piett flip and you use the Arquitens Assault Cruiser to follow that up. Now that puts a 7-8 body in space with ambush, and anything that it attacks and beats in space, it eats and creates another resource for you. And so doing that really, really can aggressively get this deck up to some really high numbers of resources very quickly. And that's going to be beneficial to a couple of the matchups that it plays into. For ambush, the Spark of Rebellion Piett card, Admiral Piett card. Not only is he an official, which is going to become beneficial in some of the rest of the package, he also turns on ambush for anything that is 6 cost or higher. And when I look at my deck lists, you're going to see that most of the space package starts at 6. And so being able to put all of those things in with a aggressive start, ambush them in, let them do damage, let them do something right out of the gate. Admiral Piett is a fantastic card to go in. Now, I said officials. One of the greatest defense pieces that I have, because of my ground package is not very big, would be the Emperor's Royal Guard. There are several officials in every color that we're going to see, except for yellow, that allow me to use Emperor's Royal Guard as a Sentinel unit. And a 3/4 body on a Sentinel unit, it's not going to set the world on fire, but it's going to be able to slow your opponents down a little bit. And then once you are punching up with a 4 power unit on turn 3 and a 7 power unit on turn 4, and you're working your way towards Devastators and other things like that that are 8 and 9 and 10 power, I don't care. All I needed to do was slow you down a little bit. Restore package. Colonel Yularen, who is also a official, and the Reinforcement Walker. Now, I don't use the Reinforcement Walker in the main deck of everything, but in a more grinding match, like if I'm playing a mirror match against Piett, I want those Reinforcement Walkers in. And then my cleanup package includes things like Darth Vader, who will go and pick up most every other ground unit that's in the deck. Turbo Laser Salvo, to be able to do area of effect damage. Anybody that's playing on the ground, I'm going to have something like a resupply carrier or an Arquitens or a bigger ship even than that, playing out in space, able to run Turbo Laser Salvo, and able to really just wreck the entire ground. Overwhelming Barrage is also great for this because it allows you to swing in bigger. But again, you're playing this, if you're playing this on what would normally be its natural turn, you're playing this for 9 off of your Arquitens. So this can be just a devastating card to use. And then we have sideboard considerations. Palpatine's Return allows you to get a discount on some of the ships that you would play back in, and be able to use some of your key ships a second time. And then salvage is another thing that you might want to consider. Salvage letting you pick up something and play it for its cost and put a damage to it is able to mitigate a little bit of kind of having your bigger ships go into your discard pile. All right. Vigilance is the first deck that we're going to look at. My officials package in Vigilance includes Director Krennic, a 2/2 shielded unit, and shielded is very important if we're starting to talk about damaging units and pings. That slows these down. He also enables an early Chimera, because through his discount and through the Piett discount, his discount stacks with Piett's. Piett uses his action ability, and then since that is the only card that is in that deck that has it's the one of 2 cards in that deck that has a when defeated effect. If it's the first one that gets played, it also gets Krennic's discount, meaning that after Piett's flip, you can bring that in for as little as 3. Regional Governor is a great control card in here. There are a lot of things that, depending on the matchup, we might not want to see our opponents play, and so being able to slam a Regional Governor, call out the card that we want to slow down, is a great way to kind of keep these things from hitting us. We can consider Rune Hako in this. He also has a official tag on him. He's a 3/2 ground unit that comes in for 2. The capital ships of Vigilance are First Light gets added, and that allows you to, if your opponents are playing ping, First Light is something that's going to allow you to really mess with their day, because everything that's been pinged is now gains grit. Fleet Interdictor is a huge wall out there in space, and it is able to defeat other cards that are 3 cost or less. I guess there are 3 cards that you can get a discount with Cunning. It also gets that discount with Cunning because it has a when defeated effect. The Avenger obviously is a big thing when we're talking about Vigilance, but also don't sleep on Malevolence. You being able to set one of your opponent's cards at a -4, -0, and to keep it from attacking this turn is a fantastic effect to be able to have, especially when we're looking usually at playing 1 card. I like the double effect that's on there. It also has Restore, so it gives me the ability to come out with Restore, make things happen. It's only a 7/7, so it's a little behind the power that you're going to get with Avenger, but it does make for a nice big hit by being able to turn off something that you might have to play into, and also keep it from attacking you that turn. For control, we gain Power of the Dark Side. We also could use No Glory Only Results, and use that to pick off some things like Chewbacca, where otherwise we wouldn't be able to interact with that card any other way than slamming one of our units into it. You can go a deep blue route. I'm not going to show that version of the deck. And in that version of it, what you're doing is that you're cutting a little bit of the green package, and you're leaning in a little bit more towards things like your Death Trooper, and putting Lieutenant Chilton in the deck. And so that strips out some of your reliance on your officials package, even though it's still there. It still works very well for you. But it allows you to go a little heavier on blue, setting up a Chilton that is potentially bigger than your Emperor's Royal Guard would be. And it's not a conditional Sentinel, so you could stick him down there and just know that you're going to block something on the ground. This is what we have right now for those Rebels Won't Escape Us, the Vigilance version of this deck. As you can see, Admiral Piett, Colonel Yularen, Director Krennic, Regional Governor. We got 10 cards up there that are 2 cost. All of them are officials. If we needed to and we didn't get an opportunity to do anything else, we can put down a Royal Guard early and wind up with a roadblock on the ground, and have some kind of benefit that's playing around it. My Super Laser Tech is here. I've got a couple of Power of the Dark Side. I've got Resupply. I still have all of that big ramp package. Overwhelming Barrage is in here, and you saw First Light. We talked about Relentless. We'll talk about it a little bit more when we talk about matchups. This deck runs all the way out to Finalizer. And so we can reasonably think that some of these things are going to be on the board. Finalizer is one of my last trade-ins. This deck sometimes feels like it runs more smoothly when you swap Finalizer out for the Reinforcement Walker just straight out. Another great card that you can use in here is that you can swap Finalizer out for your Death Troopers. Your Death Troopers are a great card for Darth Vader to be able to pull on his ambush, because they allow you to ambush up. And if you are following along on your ramp package, you're going to be able to ambush in Darth Vader a couple of turns early, meaning that things like Django or Quinlan, who come out and are a 7 health leader, if they're on 5, I'm on 7. And if I'm on 7 and they flip their leader, I stick down Darth Vader. Darth Vader pulls a Death Trooper. Death Trooper does 2 damage. Darth Vader does 5, clears their leader immediately. And so that's one of my ways to be able to get rid of that. Now, that same thing works if we're talking about DJ, but we'll get to that later. You can also consider using Rook for the same effect. You could consider, another consideration here would be to put in Timely Intervention. And you could trade that out for just about anything that you wanted as far as some of your end game package. You could trade that out for Overwhelming Barrage because your Turbo Laser Salvo is going to do the same thing. And you've got enough other capital ships that you might take out the AoE damage for the ability to be able to pop one of these guys and have them come through, especially something like Devastator, and have them come through with the Overwhelm and be able to really just clean things up. All right, moving on. We'll talk about the aggression cards next and the combos that come with them. In aggression, we have I use the thermal oscillator in this deck. And the reason that I do that is that I want to trim down my draw math a little bit. If you look through some of the other videos that are on this channel, there is one where I extensively talk about the draw math and how each of these new bases acts. If you want to do the math for yourself, you can get a hypergeometric calculator and put all the stuff in if you would like. I'm not going to go back through that again right now, but that's the pitch for that video. Aggression combos. Allegiant General Pride, especially with initiative, he presents a threat that they must answer. If you do not answer Allegiant General Pride and you let me keep initiative, I'm just going to swing with him. I'm going to do 2 to base, and I'm going to do 2 more indirect. And if you bother to put a non-unique upgrade on something, it's going to go away if damage was done to that. He's a 3 health, 2-drop official that just does a great job of doing what he does. There's nothing wrong with putting him down if I don't have initiative, but if I do, he's something that really requires an answer. Captain Tarkin finds his way into this because he is a devastating piece to put into a deck that is already heavily relying on vehicles, and it puts them with overwhelm. So this is a really, really strong way to play with Captain Tarkin. He's only a 2 attack, but he's a 5 body, and so he's going to be hard to get rid of. A potential combo is to be able to put down him and Admiral Piett, which gives your vehicles, because they're all 6 cost or greater, it gives your vehicles +1/+0 with overwhelm. And so anything that you're able to drop down is really going to put the hammer to people. The capital ships that come in this particular color, there's a lot less of them. We only add the Devastator and Ruthless Raider to our green package, but those are 2 of the best ships in the game. The Devastator allows me to direct indirect damage. It comes out on 6 resources with Piett flipped. It's a 9/6 body that absolutely demands an answer. And sometimes, just because of the nature of this deck, if your opponent can't answer 6 health in space right now, that thing gets to swing. And swinging for 9 is a third of any base. If you've gotten a chance to swing with Pride, especially if you've gotten him with initiative, you're halfway to winning a game on 2 actions. If your value from Devastator went into the base, you're beyond halfway through any of the rare bases. Planetary Bombardment is in this deck, and Planetary Bombardment, especially comboed with Devastator, I get to now choose where that indirect damage goes. In almost every case that I've played this, it goes to the base. I'm just paying 6 to do 12 damage to your base, and I'm generally okay with that because, you can go scrape units off the board if you'd like to see if you can manage to do that. At that point, good luck. If I've gotten to swing with Devastator and play Planetary Bombardment, it's just a matter of pinging you out. Here's the red version of this deck. We're still seeing Admiral Piett along with Legion General Pride, Colonel Yularen. A smaller package of 2 cost units because the draw math is significantly better. If we're really feeling like we need it in our sideboard, we have the Shore Trooper that can come in and give you a little bit more help on the ground. But again, our target is to get those 6 cards, to get Super Laser Tech or Resupply, and we want them in our hand. that's our turn 2 play. Um, the way you combat Piett across the board is to get rid of those 2 cards. If you're playing and you have Jam Communications, or if you have Spark of Rebellion, and Piett's sitting across from you, I don't care what you thought your turn 1 play was. Go find out if they have ramp and get rid of it, because if not, they're going to get out ahead of you and you're going to lose the game. Overwhelming Barrage, everything that's in here is leaning more towards a 3 of, with the exception of Darth Vader, Relentless, and Devastator. And the reason for that is that those units are probably going to stick, and they're unique. So I don't have any use for having a second one in my hand. It's a 45 card deck because of Thermal Oscillator. This one runs very smoothly because of the card draw difference in the math. I do like this version of it a lot. Very linear, very powerful. Number 3, Cunning. This is the one that is probably played the least and talked about the least as far as videos that I have seen so far. I may, if I get time, come back and do individual deck videos on these just to talk about them a little more, but I think we're probably going to cover them in depth well enough on the deep dive to not need to do so. The capital ships that are here. Radiant 7 is a nice one. Deals 5 indirect, and for each non-leader unit gets -1, -0 for each damage that's on it. So you shrink the size. Your opponents have the option to either soak that damage to their base or to shrink the attack of their non-leader units. And this can be a very powerful play, especially when you consider that that is a Piett flip turn with no help. So Piett flips, he drops Radiant 5, he does 5 damage across the board to the base, or to whatever your opponent wants to damage. You leave behind a 5/6 body, but it's shrinking everything on the table while it is in play. However, you also have access to the Corporate Light Cruiser, and this is effectively a 5/6 ambush. And so we have something else to fill that 6 spot. I want to play Resupply Carrier more often than I want to play this, but if my opponent is starting to pressure space at all, this is a good way to answer 5 health worth of something that's out in space. It has Raid 1 on it, and so it's going to come out and swing a little bit bigger than its actual size. And it's just good at going ahead and clearing something that's out there. A lot of the piloted starfighters would only have 5 health. Most of your things like the Falcon early on, only 4 health. Fet's Fire Spray, the newer Fet's Fire Spray is only 4 health. And so getting around a 5 is a good thing for it to do. But the thing that this deck does uniquely, and the thing that Cunning does uniquely, is it gives you access to triple Dark Raid and Sneak Attack. Now, those 2 cards are going to do a thing that Piett does not do in his other decks. So this one is less linear, and I'm going to pause here to take a little bit more time with that. When we play Django, which is a very, very common place to see triple Dark Raid and Sneak Attack, one of the things that Django can suffer from is that playing triple Dark Raid does not leave the card on the table. So I bring in Radiant 7. Doesn't matter what I bring in. I bring in one of my ships with triple Dark Raid. Yes, I got to go get it from my deck. Yes, it got discounted. I was able to bring that thing in under rate. And especially if Piett is flipped, I can do that massively under rate. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But what happens at the end of the turn is that card goes away. It goes back to my hand, but it does not remain on the board. It is not in a ready state at the beginning of the next turn. And so unless it has an immediate impact, unless it's a Corporate Light Cruiser that I'm able to draw in and play early and ambush a unit and get things out of my way, the value of something like triple Dark Raid is a little bit tricky when we're talking about a deck, Piett, that really plays 1 card per turn. because once you get past Piett's flip, that's what you're going to be doing most of the time. You're going to be playing 1 card per turn, unless you just get fancy and you wind up putting 2 cards down on the ground, because that's the only place where your cards are that cheap. Or you wind up having eaten so much out in space that your acquittance cruisers have had to take care of threats, or had to take care of sentinels, or had to take care of something, that you have a longer resource row and you're able to put more things on the board so that you can't be tapped out and exhausted by something like Django. That's the only way that you're going to wind up really playing more than 1 card at a time. We're also big enough in most of our units that why is the game still happening if I've got 3 ships? If I'm swinging these into base and you don't have sentinels and you don't have a way to stop me from doing that, I'm eating 10 to 12 health or more a turn. So there's just not a good reason why the game would extend to a point where I am playing multiple things per turn as a Piett player. So it does allow me to play a little bit lighter on my feet with those capital ships, play a little bit less of them in the deck, and keep a package that is a little bit more versatile with things like Bamboozle, No Good to Me Dead, and Waylay, which are better tempo plays in a way that Piett's other decks don't run. Let's look at this one. Pretty similar start, except that I did not lean into the officials nearly as hard with this. And so Admiral Piett and Colonel Yularen are still there because they give me value in that initial spot. Crafty Smuggler came in here because he gives me a shielded 2/2 unit. And so if I'm having to deal with pings, Crafty is never a bad 2-cost play. Sneak Attack, Boba Fett. There's there's moments out there where I've gone Sneak Attack, Super Laser Tech, cleared a turn 1 play and ramped on turn 1, which is a perfectly fine line of things to do. Boba Fett is a great cleanup unit on the ground. His on-attack ability is still unparalleled, even though it is not as useful as it was in set 1. Triple Dark Raid, Waylay, we've already talked about. Commandeer is in this deck, and Commandeer provides one of the cleanest answers to Django, and so this is a deck that has a little bit more tech in it for that deck and matchup specifically than some of the others. We have the Corporate Light Cruiser that we already talked about, the Radiant that we've talked about, and then we have ships that we've already covered. Arquittance, Relentless, Devastator, Finalizer. You'll notice in that sideboard, something's a little different. You got a red card and a blue card. Why? Well, because this deck does something that nothing else can do. And it's on a slide and the math of it a little bit later, but I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. When I play Triple Dark Raid in an Admiral Piett deck on his flip, if I have done what I intend to do, ramped turn 2, played a resupply carrier turn 3, the next time that I play a card with Piett flipped over, if that card is Triple Dark Raid, I can play Red Devastator in a yellow deck, in a yellow-green deck. Or I can wind up playing something like the Avenger in one of these decks, and it comes in ready. So Avenger coming in ready, holy crap. Not only do I wind up swinging for 9, but I take 2 units off the board with it. So I am not at all sad about playing Triple Dark Raid and not keeping the Avenger on the table when I've done 9 damage, cleared 2 units. That is a marvelous play for this deck. And it's something that this particular version of it is uniquely able to do. All right, matchups. We're going to go through these, talk about them a little bit one at a time. Django, as we know, Django is going to seek to tap us down and bounce our plays, but it is more action intensive than you are. Because our plays are typically going to be one thing per turn, take initiative. Take initiative and swing for base. Make Django play smaller than they want to. If he's going to play triple dark raid, and that triple dark raid is going to ping one of the units and exhaust it, you deploy another unit with your action. Now he's got 2 to deal with, because usually his units are not big enough to take out your capital ships. Get initiative. Swing the bigger one. His unit went away because he played it with triple dark raid. His unit went away at the end of the turn. He played sneak attack to get it out there. That's probably a little bit better for him when we're talking about Ruthless Raider. But I've got 2 ready units at the end of that turn to his none, as far as the triple dark raid ship or vehicle went. So I say consider claiming first as a first action if you don't start with initiative. And I don't know how I managed to misspell it there, but either way, especially as if your hand is well set up for ramp. I'm okay with taking 2. Okay, whatever. Crafty Smuggler's going to hit me for 2 after I ramp. I don't care. However, you can also force that choice of burning Tarkin Town into an early unit. And depending on which deck you're running, that might be the better play, is to force his hand. If you're running General Pride, if you're running the red version of this, they're likely to Tarkin Town that out, just because it is a extremely damaging unit to sit there and just eat and eat and eat. Make them burn it. Make them burn it so that down the line, Ruthless Raider can't punch 2 damage into something, and then they wind up crashing a ship into your ship, and it's, we're going to Tarkin Town and get rid of that. Make them burn that. Ramp. The key to beating Django, as we said and kind of talked about, is being out ahead of him. I can be at 7 when he's at 5. The only counter he might have is if Django is running Cham Syndulla. However, that play means that he squeezed out some of his bigger threats. In the second game, I expect a Django player might sideboard into this. I expect anything that's playing red might sideboard into this, because Cham Syndulla is a ramp counter. But that means that some of his other bigger threats, he might have taken out sneak attack to put in Cham. Django's downfall is his events. The sooner you can get to your relentless, the sooner you turn off his game. If he's not able to sit there and hit triple dark raid into Devastator or triple dark raid into a War Juggernaut, he's not able to turn off your board. Small ping damage is insignificant to those bigger ships. It turns them out for a play, but if I'm playing blue, great. That just means I get an opportunity to smuggle in and bring everything up with grit and end the game with first light. Kill on sight, Django. If you have the ability to Turbo Laser Salvo or to Overwhelming Barrage or something like that to take him out on his flip turn, or Vader into him with a Death Trooper if you're playing blue, do so, because the biggest thing that he can do to you at that point is to play IG-2000 or play War Juggernaut and ping out multiple units rather than just one. Han Solo. Out of order. I think that Han is not going to be as prevalent as this deck is. The slides are in the order that they're in. Spark Rebellion, Han Solo, Yellow Han, just so we're all clear, and we're the first Yellow Han, not the new one. Han is a little bit tougher in his yellow form, because Cunning will allow him to tap down 2 units at a time. And give himself a big buff with what he hits at the same time. His ability to resource cheat can be interrupted if you have enough power to stop a 4/6 when Han deploys, and you do have a few ways to do that, especially if you are out ahead and able to Overwhelming Barrage off of a resupply carrier, for example. That'll take care of Han. Han's strength is almost, though not entirely exclusively on the ground. You're not going to win that arena from him. It's just not going to happen. This deck is not built for that. But you can play Super Laser Tech and know that you're going to have things to slam into. My preferred play in most cases is to play Resupply over Super Laser Tech. But in Han, you're going to have units out there that you can crash that into. He might bounce it, but that's going to be his turn. Darth Vader and Turbo Laser Salvo are your best options for clearing off the ground. Han players are going to hold on to Waylay or use Kiara, and Kiara is another one of those that you might have to KOS just so that you can deal with her stopping the board. Admiral Piett. It's a grinding match, and we've talked extensively about this. These are linear. Whoever draws better and answers better is going to be at the advantage. All three versions have kind of similar strengths. Expect that you're going to see blue and red more commonly than yellow in this early run. I don't think green is going to be very popular at all, and so we did not cover it here. Sideboarding choices are likely to determine how the match goes, and especially if that first game is long, if you can get through a second one. By color. Against yellow, try and stick Relentless. Yellow is going to have, as we talked about, Waylay, Sneak Attack, TDR. Turn those off. Against blue, the Avenger is going to get rid of something when it hits the table. And the Avenger is going to hit the table. It will clear one unit. Don't let it clear a second. Avenger attacking is the thing that will make that deck sing. Against red, kill inside the Red Devastator. Quinlan Voss. Ramp aggressively, mulligan for it if you need to. Quinlan runs most of his damage in multiples of 3, even when we talk about Plo Koon. Plo Koon is 6, but he runs most of his damage in a multiple of 3. It's going to take him around 10 actions to destroy any base, 9 if we're on Thermal Oscillator. But we're much, much bigger and much better at our end game than he is. We need so many fewer actions to be able to take him out. And we get ramp. And because we get ramp, we're ahead of his ping. And if we're ahead of his ping, the only thing Quinlan can really do is to force throw us and hand disrupt us and try and get himself to a point where we are top decking. Okay. Sometimes we're going to top deck. And at that point, it's a matter of, is my top deck, is the card that I'm going to get to hold on to and play good enough to keep me in this game? And I feel like in a lot of cases, the answer to that is yes. So early on, we're going to want to hold on to, we're going to want to try and hold on to multiple options for ramp if we can, especially 3-cost versions of it. And try and get initiative, because what we want to do is that we want to put those things on the table before he has an opportunity to rip them from our hand. If possible, once a force unit is on the table, keep something small in your hand. You don't have a lot of it, but 2 drops are a premium, because that means only 2 damage going into one of your units if he decides to force throw you. It's possible that he's going to do that and is going to have, the ability to drop Ahsoka, remove something from our hand, and tap out a unit. But it's a bigger threat to our fleet if the Devastator is in my hand than if Resupply is in my hand. Slam the door with Relentless. He is very dependent on those events. He is very dependent on force throwing us, on pillaging, on putting down cards, jam communications that are keeping us hand light. And if Quinlan is expected to be stronger in your meta, if you know that there are a lot of Quinlan players around, if you're familiar with the area that you're in and you think that's going to be a big thing, consider main decking 3 of Relentless and or putting Palpatine's Return as a more prominent card in your sideboard. Because we want the option to put Relentless on the table and shut down this game of hand disruption. Quinlan will have to race units. And so the other thing that you're able to do is, if your opening hand has an official and a sentinel in it, you're able to put these things down. He's going to have to play into that sentinel. His units are going to be smaller, and I'm perfectly fine barraging off of a resupply carrier. That's a 6 barrage that's done a lot of good against units that have had to chew their way in through a Sentinel. So planetary bombardment, even better. And then same thing with turbo laser salvo. You're going to be able to chew through his units better than he is with yours. And lastly, Sabine. Common theory in set 1 was that it was really hard to ramp into Sabine because you weren't developing a lot of board presence, and she was going to do that very rapidly. The Sabine that we see right now tends to be very different from that set 1 Sabine. And what I mean by that is that the current versions of Sabine tend to have a much more on-curve style of play. They tend to play a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 5 and a 6. And that's how they're going to play into their curve rather than playing a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and then a pair of 2s and then a 2 and a 3. That's not where Sabine goes anymore. And so what we're seeing with Sabine right now, and that more direct version of her play, and wanting to have ECL and wanting to use that to plow through some of your early units, ramp. Your ramped plays are better than her par plays. They just are. Your 2-cost units are mostly officials. Get an Emperor's Royal Guard on the board. Block 1 or 2 of her actions. Sentinel is going to be active because you have so many officials early on. Delaying her enough to get off an overwhelming barrage off of a resupply carrier can be all that you need to stabilize. Sabine's likely to ping you every time that you claim. It's fine. Colonel Yularen, you pinged yourself. You shortened the game for your own base. Great. And then everything that he deploys, awesome. Colonel Yularen's a best case scenario for this match. They either have to burn action swinging into him to turn off his heal, or the majority of my deployments, since I'm running a bit more green heavy as far as my space units go, hey, look, we looked through the space units. The bulk of what is there for capital ships in Piett is green. We're going to play green units. They either have to swing into and use one of their actions to clear Colonel Yularen, or, and especially if they have to do it through a Sentinel, or I'm going to get health back at return. So now let's talk about which Piett to play. You've sat down, you've been through a deep dive of this, you want to play with Piett, you want to try this play style out. The strengths of blue, it's an easy space Sentinel. You have a bigger removal package. You do have quite a large official package. You have a way to mitigate some plays when we start talking about the regional governor. You've got access to things like No Glory Only Results, to Power of the Dark Side. You've got a lot of access to some good cards that are here to slow the game down and control things. Red, the most explosive of them. It's the most linear of them, especially if you play it with the Thermal Oscillator, because you're going to wind up with 5 cards less in your deck. It has access to Planetary Bombardment on curve, which is the single biggest piece of just board damage you can have unless you happen to catch a turbo laser salvo with a bunch of stuff on the ground. It's not the biggest splash damage that you have, but if you can direct that with Devastator, good luck solving that puzzle. The strength of yellow is that I think, with the exception of a couple videos like this, it is the least covered of those decks. The least number of people are going to know it, have experience with it, have played it, and play it well. The most common versions you're going to see are red-blue, and so you're going to be able to kind of catch people, not necessarily by surprise when you play this, but they're looking for Piett to do some different things than what yellow does. It has access to TDR. I said that we would get to the math of this later on. Combo that with Piett. Discount ships by 7. On five resources, I can play Radiant 7. I could do that with Piett flipped, or I could do that triple dark raid prior to his, or I could do that triple dark raid. On 6 resources, we could normally play our Quittens. Now we can play Devastator. Now we can play Spark of Rebellion Devastator. If you sequence that and you got your resupply the way that you're talking about normally, turn 4 Finalizer. Turn 4 12-12 Overwhelm that captures things in their arena. And so you can, even if they defeat your units and take theirs back, you can capture out a good portion of what's out there with a ship that's going to come in and have overwhelm damage as a giant body. And if you sequence that right, it's turn 4 play. So you have some interesting options with each of them. I know that you have a lot of stuff, and I covered way more of it than I expected in this. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. I am expecting to do a Boba Fett burn deck this week. There's a couple other things up on the channel that are meta decks. We've got a Cad Bane, who I expect to be a kind of fringe part of the meta. We've got a Jango Fett, who is a part of the meta. There is a contest up through the end of the month to win some prestige cards if you choose to find that video. A lot of stuff going on, and it's been real fun kind of being a part of it. We would like to see it grow. Hit the subscribe button. Thanks for checking it out, and we will see you next time.